So I'm back again. And man, I'm just gonna jump right into it. So 2 years ago, I made two different videos. One was called the four cognitive perceiving functions, and then the other one was called the four cognitive judging functions. And that was um, after I felt like I got a good enough handle on the Myers-Briggs system to be able to define them the best that I can, and kind of like teach people from the maybe like the most lowest level elements, like beginners, like like what each cognitive function meant and how it may work and how you could see it played out in real life. Now that was about 2 to 3 years ago, and it's received a lot of attention. I'm actually very happy about that. People said that they commented on the video a lot, and they direct messaged me a lot to this day, saying things all the time like, "Wow, this is like the best explanation that I've seen on YouTube," and stuff like that. So I'm really happy about that because I try to make things digestible, and I try to make them so that where I'm jumping into the mind of my students, if you will, and I'm trying to say, okay, what's the best way for them to understand this while still containing all of the information. It was 2 to 3 years ago. So since then, a lot has happened. I've done a lot of reading. And somebody can read about the theories all day, but the biggest thing is seeing it in real life. Like, I don't care what you're telling me, what this author said, or whatever. If you can't show me how it's seen in real life, then that theory only holds like so much weight. So yeah, I've done a lot of reading, which is important, but then the other half is actually real life experiences. And as you can see from my channel, I've been doing the interviews with different MBTI types, and I've been asking them specifically how they related to certain functions and everything, what things are true and what things are not true. And then on top of that, just a lot of coaching, a lot of profiling sessions, a lot of watching other people do profiling sessions. I went into Personality Hackers profiler training course, and I learned so much, and I was surrounded by people who knew their types definitively and was able to be like, that's not exactly how NE works, and stuff like that. And of course, I've been involved in the Twitter community, the Twitter Myers-Briggs community, where we talk a lot about Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, and then sometimes they even weave in astrology, all of that. So all of that to say, I've done a lot of growing since that 2 to 3 year ago double video thing. And although I don't want to do anything take it down, I felt like I wanted to expand upon whatever I said. I haven't watched those videos in a long time, but I think that that's even better because now I can make this video so that where I can explain all the functions once again, and if anything, it's just building more upon what I already said in those past videos. So I just wanted to state that. I guess that's my way of stating my credentials or where I'm coming from, if you will. And I also lastly want to say that I found this to be incredibly important, especially based off of a recent video that I posted about the overgeneralization of the nicknames for the cognitive functions. I've realized that it's kind of like in debates when people are like, all right, well, let's define our terms. What does abortion mean to you? Where do we agree and where do we disagree? Okay, what does euthanasia mean to you? What does love mean to you? What does cheating mean to you? We have to know that we're actually talking about the same thing before we can argue. And so this video is going to be my attempt to not make this necessarily definitive, but this is me pretty much saying, hey, this is my experience from all the coaching, from all the reading, from all the conversations, from all of the, just like creating Venn diagrams and all that. This is my experience on what the functions mean to me, how they look like, how I've experienced them from an outside perspective, how I've experienced them from within myself, the functions that I do value, and, things like that. And I know that socionics, for example, has their own way of defining functions and certain personality types, and Jungians have their own way of defining certain functions and personality types and all of that. And I've actually woven a lot of their beliefs into how, like, what I believe functions, can be defined as. So as I read off my functions and describe them and everything, then I've definitely woven in a lot of, like, things I've picked up from these other systems as well. And I've just kind of made this a holistic view of how I view each cognitive function. So that's my big intro, to let you guys know, like, yeah, this is going to be a video, and I'm still deciding if this is going to be split into 1 part or 2 parts. Yeah, this is going to be a video where I'm describing all of the cognitive functions. Once again, I'm defining them in my own words, and then I'm pretty much like, letting you guys know, like, what it is. We're going to start off with the judging functions. So the first judging function that we're going to go over is extroverted feeling, also known as FE, and personality hacker nicknamed it Harmony. As you can see here, this is a graphic of a definition that I placed based off of my blog, defining the cognitive functions in my own words. You can find that link in the description below, and you can also, find it in just pretty much like on my blog site. But you can read these throughout the video. However, I have a list of bullet points over here that I'm going to be going over to kind of like describe each function. So for FE, the first bullet point that I have is buttons in order, which is essentially, kind of like what I'm saying in the definition. Like, I always describe FE as knowing the exact buttons to push in the exact order to get a desired emotional reaction from an individual or group. And this is why a lot of times, like, people may say that FE is manipulative, but and it is, but manipulation has a negative connotation to it. Manipulation is not always a bad thing. Just because you know what order to do something in to get a desired result does not mean that you're doing things like in an ill-intended way. A lot of times, FE users, they know that if they talk to this person about this and they do it this way, blah, 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 then they know that this will evoke an authentic emotion out of that person. This will set the atmosphere to a state where people feel more free and vulnerable to be able to express their authentic emotions. And so a lot of times, like, that's kind of like how I see FE. Another facet to it is the lines and interplay between people. So FE, the way that I see it, is pretty much like I know about the line between me and someone else, and I know the line between me and another person, and then I know the line between that person and that person. Like, I can see it, and in my head, it's like a huge spider web of a society where we're all connected, and it's our interconnections. And in my mind, a white line means like, okay, like, this is neutral, or this is like, a good line. A green line means like, okay, these people are like really close, they're like best friends. A red line means like, whoa, this is like, they have a lot of tension over there. And then pretty much like, yeah, it's very nuanced in my head, like, the interconnections between people. And I know that, socionics, they kind of like identify this a little bit with INFPs, or like not INFPs, sorry, FI users. And I think that in socionics sometimes I test out as INFP. Maybe this is why, because when they ask that question, it's like, oh, how do you relate to people? So yeah, I could be wrong. I'll plan to make a video with socionics experts or enthusiasts in the future more often about that. But anyway, that's how FE is for me. It's understanding the interconnection between all of us, and then seeing that line and understanding, like, the health of that dynamic. It's often asking the question, how can we get everybody's needs met? So oftentimes FE users are kind of like, out of touch, from my experience, with what they value or what they intrinsically want for themselves. And they're more trying to find the consensus with the group so they can then, make a decision based off of that, which then becomes what they actually want. So if you ask an FE user a lot of the times, okay, what do you want? They're often going to say they pretty much want what everybody else wants in a way. And that's true. Like, that's what's authentic for them. That's what's authentic for me. Like, I genuinely don't necessarily know what I want, except that what I necessarily want is what is best for everybody in the group. And in doing this, FE users always want to be on the same page, whether it's in values or it's in data. So this means that, I think that FE is at its highest, and of course FE always comes with TI, so we're gonna get to that. But FE is always at its highest level of maturity, in my opinion, when it's created a space where people can share information and their opinions on things without feeling judged for it. And then we can all learn, and nobody's like being defensive and holding so much to their opinions, but people are speaking tactfully, and they're also like, respecting each other's opinions and things. And we're all trying to get on the same page with what we value, with what we want, and with the information that we have. Because then if we're all on the same page, which is kind of like the whole point of why I'm doing this video, if we can all agree that, okay, this is what FE means, this is what NI means, this is what TI means, this is what SE means, then we can go from there so that we can like create harmony. Now that we all have defined our terms, when we're talking about this concept, when we're talking about this, then we can all already know that we're talking about the same thing. And then when we have disagreements, it can be easier to point out why we disagree. And it's okay to have disagreements as long as we at least know where the other person is coming from. So I think that's what FE could be best known as. So FE users usually, ever since they were a child, they pretty much have been watching how people interact, and they've been registering that. So they've been registering small things. Like Antonio Dodge from Personality Hacker uses the example of how an FE user a lot of times may be able to identify, like, okay, when I gave a rose to my mom, this made her happy. And when I gave worms to my mom, this made her upset. When I did this, when I didn't clean my room, this made my father upset. When my father, bad example, but when my father cheated on my mother, then this made my mother upset. When this person said this in that way to that person, then that made that person upset, or that made that person flattered. They're registering all of these interplays, and so then by registering all of these interplays, they build how to not only communicate with other people, and that's why they're able to know those exact buttons to push in the exact order and everything, because they've been paying so much attention to how we interact with each other and then what that effect has done. But then on top of that, this becomes so matured and so advanced that they're able to see how this works with societies. And so now it's like, whoa, this country is not agreeing with this country because their values are like this, and blah, 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 blah. So like it can grow off to like huge expanded, like, things like, so that small interaction between you and your mom when you gave her a rose eventually matures and develops into like seeing how like whole societies, like why they may not get along, or whole groups of people, like, oh shoot, black people and white people, they're not getting along a lot of times because of this and because of that, or because black people tend to say Black Lives Matter, and then the white people think that they're trying to say that, oh, so you're saying that Black Lives Matter more than white lives do, and then the black people are not explaining like, no, we mean that all lives do matter, but it's just the black, we're not going to get into that, but y'all get the point. And then the last little bullet point that I have for FE is that FE is often known for absorbing emotion. Some FE users may not relate to this, and so I don't it's still something that I'm continuing to fish through. I know that those who do value NI, so NFJs especially, a lot of ones that I've coached, they relate a lot of times to, not all of them. My INFJ friend David, he doesn't necessarily relate to it, but then I believe that's also because he's a 5. There's a lot of different factors, and sometimes people are just empaths, which is a whole other thing. But FE is the function that's most known for absorbing emotion, because it's connected to people and everything, and then it's kind of it's almost basing its emotion values off of other people's in a way, and it's always assessing their emotions and values in that sense. That's something that I know me personally as an FE dominant, that's what I've related to a lot, way even before I knew about the Myers-Briggs system. That was one of the things that resonated with me easily and heavily. It's wow, I've always wondered about that, why. I thought it was a spiritual gift, and I believe that it possibly is. A lot of these things, I believe God does manifest himself, but that's my own philosophy and opinion. But I've always absorbed emotions of other people, and that's also been a reason as to why I know how to help someone, and I'm able to empathize with them more deeply, even if I haven't experienced it for myself. So yeah, that is FE. Now, TI, also known as introverted thinking, and then by Personality Hacker known as accuracy. As you can see in the description that I have over there, TI is essentially called accuracy not because it's always accurate, but because it's always looking for logical inconsistencies within itself and in other people, and it's always asking what makes sense, what is logically consistent, what is congruent, things like that. TI also works a lot with frameworks. TI loves to pick things apart to their simplest forms and then see how everything by itself relates. So it's understanding systems thinking, all of the different nodes in the system, what each, when you build a car, for example, what does each individual part of this car, what does it do? So a lot of people can just look at the car holistically, yeah, that's a car, you just turn the key in the ignition, and then the car starts, but the TI user, not literally, unless they study this, but the TI user, they understand that, okay, this sets off this, which sets off this, which sets off this, which sets off this, and is connected to this and connected to that. And so they understand all of the different nodes in the system that is influencing the car to start. This also goes into a lot of logic. TI users oftentimes, they are the ones who can pick apart arguments very quickly, because they're oh wait, no, this, that checks off, this doesn't add up, this, all of that, it just doesn't make sense. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So TI users, in a way, they're always looking for information that is congruent, that is logical, that makes sense, and they try to extrapolate any type of biases, because they just want the raw data. They just want the raw information, and they try to impersonalize it the best they can. But of course, since it's connected to FE, you can only impersonalize but so much. TI is also known for organizing the data, and so in the same sense, TI likes to gather information a lot of times just for the sake of it, and then it organizes the data within itself. TI users are usually often very good at detecting when somebody's lying, or even if they're lying to themselves, because they're able to identify what information just, once again, just doesn't make sense. I feel that's the core of everything when it comes to TI. Is this logically consistent? Does this make sense? But I think that despite the nickname that Personality Hacker gave it, which is accuracy, it's important to be noted that TI, the reason why it's given the name accuracy is because that's its ideal. So it's looking to have accurate information. Like its process is more of what it's trying to do. Like TI is a process focused function. So it's trying its best to have a great process so that it can get to an accurate answer. So it can have a logically consistent answer. However, that doesn't mean that whatever answer they conclude is always actually accurate. In fact, a lot of TI users, healthy TI users, can understand how like truth may be relative depending on the person. But for them, it's like as long as it makes sense and as long as it's like logically consistent, as long as you have like a good framework for it, as long as you understand all the different data points here, then okay, then I guess that like that's pretty much like what matters to the TI user. It's all about like that good reasoning that's not polluted with a lot of bias and a lot of like just personal feelings that may get in the way of the information itself. For this reason, TI users are often known as like being like direct and just like saying things like just for how it is, because they are just merely telling you what they think is the accurate answer. They're just giving data. They're just giving information. They don't see it as anything that's supposed to be triggering. But a lot of people can be offended if they feel like the TI user's intention is to offend. So yeah, when you connect FE and TI, then you pretty much have, like, we call this a polarity. FE and TI always come together. So once again, just like I said with FE, they always want people to to get on the same page with values and data. And it's the same thing with TI. Like TI wants people to be on the same page. And, if FE has not tapped into its own TI to understand, like, okay, this is what I think about this, then it's always just going to go along with whatever the group wants. And then if TI is only stuck on what they think about it, but they haven't really like talked to the rest of the tribe, to the rest of the group, like, hey, what did you get for this answer? Then they're going to be stuck in their own thought about what they think about things. And like I said, it's not always accurate, so it's important to be able to have a good balanced usage of FE and TI. And just last, point, like TI is also like responsible for a lot of like the logical fallacies that we see. And so, or like TI is like known, like the names for the logical fallacies, or like coming up with the logical fallacies. Like TI users often, before they even like learn about the logical fallacies, they kind of already know or they've always like had the logical fallacies in their head. They just didn't know the names for it. Like they didn't have like language for it, but they're always like looking for like, okay, that was just a red herring because you got like, you just wanted to deter the argument, or like, oh, that was an ad hominem because you got offended based off of what this person said. That was definitely a straw man fallacy because, stuff like that. That's kind of like how TI users are, because they're focused on the information. They're not focused on the personal. So TI users are literally the people that are like, hey, don't take this personally. This is just information. And I think that's like the best way that I could explain it. Now, FI, also known as introverted feeling, well, technically known as introverted feeling, but then by personality hacker known as authenticity. This is concerned, from my experience, with inner alignment with their values. FI is always asking the question, like, how does this make me feel? Who am I? What does this say about me? Like, they're very, very in tune with their values, with who they are as a person, with their own motivations. And they're constantly trying to refine that. They're trying to stay true to themselves. Not saying that other types do not try to stay true to themselves either, but FI is seemingly the most concerned with doing this, with going into themselves and then aligning all of the dissenting voices in their heads to like pick the most accurate one. I have the Personality Hacker book, of course, and this was actually a very interesting segment that I read about FI at one point that I thought was like very fascinating, that I wanted to kind of share. It says, as authenticity matures, it learns to interact with these inner voices as a council, with ego at the head of the table. In the final battle scene of the movie Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker, who we suspect to be an INFP, has to determine which motivation will win out in a formidable and pivotal moment. Which voice will he listen to? The one that wants revenge in the behalf of his friends, the one that is seduced by power, the voice that is pained and angered by an abandoning father, or the one that stays true to the ethics molded by his Jedi training and mentors? In the end, Luke follows his highest ethic, and the other motivations must fall in line behind it. So essentially, as you can see, like FI users, they're often like kind of like with the same thing like with FE/Harmony users, where they're like seeing like, okay, what's the best decision for the group, and they're listening to all of the different thoughts, like, okay, what does everybody want, and then how can we bring it down to one, so that we can like, they look at the FE users seem to, like, in my opinion and from my experience, look at the group as one entity, as one person, so they can make it like they can get one value in a way that everybody would be like happy, like bring into the middle ground. In the same sense, the FI user kind of does this within themselves. They'll seemingly like, not in like a schizophrenic type of way, but like have like several different voices within themselves. Like I believe that T'Challa from the Black Panther was an ISFP who also leads with FI, and in the same sense as Luke Skywalker, like he was like, okay, well, do I open up Wakanda? Do I kill Killmonger? Do I, actually like, just keep continuing to protect my people? Should I, do this? Like they're like looking at the nuance of their values and seeing, okay, but which one is most me? Which one will represent me the best? And I think that that's like the biggest thing for FI users. Like, what does this say about me? How can I be most represented authentically in this decision? This makes them also very aware of other people's motivations, because then in understanding their own motivations and understanding their own feelings, which is also another thing, a big superpower that FI users have, they understand the nuance of feelings. They understand the nuance of how how something made them feel, and they don't just see sad, but they see all the different shades of sad, all the different shades of happy, all the different shades of anger, all the different shades of frustration, whatever it might be. They look at all of these different nuances, and then they observe them within themselves, they experience it, and then they allow them, like, in understanding that nuance, they're able to be like, okay, and then they find the best, like when they see somebody who seems to be sad in a certain nuance, they find the most close nuance within themselves that they've experienced to kind of mirror that. So FI users oftentimes like can mirror emotion in that way, because they're using their understanding of their own emotions, of their own values, of their own motivations to be able to understand other people's emotions, values, and motivations in that sense. And then this also causes them to be very self-expressive, because they understand such on a deep level the nuance of human emotion, of values, and all of that. Then they want to be authentic. They want to live true to what most represents them and their motivations and how they want to be represented in the world. This causes them to be very authentic, and this causes them to, it causes them to be very expressive. That's the word that I wanted to say, actually. It causes them to express their most deepest inner feelings. And once again, this isn't to say that other types are incapable of doing this, but this is just what FI users are most in tune with, and they're most concerned with doing on a consistent basis. Now, FI always comes with TE, extroverted thinking, also known as effectiveness by Personality Hacker. And TE is always asking the question, what works? And it's pretty much a straightforward function, in my opinion. TE is asking the question like, what works? It carries out actions due to FI because since it's connected to FI, so this polarity, the FI and TE always come together, then TE is almost like the automobile and FI is the gas. Like once a TE user has strong enough FI, like this is what I want, then all of a sudden now the FI is like the gas or the cheerleader in a way for the TE to go off and get what they want. And so TE is like the best at knowing how to find exactly what they want and like pave a path to get what they want. Because TE likes to carry out the actions or the motivations or the desires of FI. Like, okay, this is what I want, and so now this is how I'm gonna find the best way to get it. TE is very good at streamlining. It knows, okay, this is the most effective way to carry out this plan. It'll just make the most sense logically to do this and do that and do this and do that before I do this and before I do that and before I do that. So it knows how to like literally like just, not literally, figuratively, kill a whole bunch of birds like, like with one stone, or like know how to like knock down as many things off of their checklist or to-do list without going completely out of the way. Like it just knows how to like organize things in that sense. TE is also extremely good with resource management. Like I know so many TE users who are incredible with money. And even it goes down to the point where like they're so good with resource management that they'll play certain like games. Like I know in ISTJ, actually Shantae, the one that I played, the one that I interviewed on my channel, and she's incredibly good at Mancala because she's an ISTJ, sexual self-preservation, and so she's like really just good at like, not in like a bad way, but like hoarding things for herself, like thinking like, okay, these are my resources and I need to make sure, like in a game of Mancala where it's like I have to make sure that I have the most on my side. TE users are just kind of good at doing that. Like they know how to be able to do that for themselves, and then in the same sense they also know to be able to do that for you. So if you want to like learn how to like progress and like get more money and all of that, like you'll probably like see TE users a lot of times who are like, hey, I can help you with that, I can help you with gaining resource. In fact, TE dominants are the ones who make the most money, usually, according to statistics. And this is because their focus is so driven on like, okay, how can I generate resource? How can I gather resource? How can I use resource in the most efficient and effective way? TE is also always gauging the pass and fail criteria. It's always just asking, once again, what works? Okay, did this pass or did this fail? Okay, let's keep note of that. Will this pass or will this fail? Let's keep note of that. Like, what is going to work? And then in the same sense, it's always gauging the cost and benefit analysis. So it's like always analyzing like, okay, how much is this going to cost me? How much am I going to benefit from this? Which you can see the FI coming out in the same sense, like, okay, what is in it for me? Again, this doesn't necessarily make them selfish in a bad way, but more self-centered. And it could bleed into the negative view of selfishness. But I want to make that very clear. Like FI is not intrinsically selfish in a negative way. It's just more of like self-centered, as in like it starts from within itself and then it like branches out to like to kind of like accommodate for others. Just like FE, it understands itself the most by understanding other people, according to my experience. So yeah, but TE is always looking at the cost and benefit analysis, and then it's like looking for like that's what makes it like very good at making like very tough calls, because it's focused on the outcome. So it's like, okay, like TE can look at people and it's like, all right, look, honestly, I know that you're having a hard time at home and everything, and I don't mean to be like that mean person or whatever, but I have to fire you because the truth of the matter is you're costing a lot to our company, and this that, and I just have to make this tough call. And it's not that the TE user doesn't care. A lot of times they don't, but a lot of times they do, but they just know that the end result is what they're mainly looking for. And so if they have to cut off that person from the team, then so be it, if that's going to be able to get them to where they need to go. So yeah, that is TE, and those are the 4 judging functions, and I have just decided that I am going to make the 4 perceiving functions in a different video after all. But I want to make sure that you guys, leave your questions, comments, concerns. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to add your own experience in the description below. Be sure to check out my blog where I defined all the terms and everything, and check out the older video too, because I actually spent a lot of time on that one back then to really define the cognitive functions, and I probably added even more to a lot of those functions. So I would say the best thing to do is to add what I've said in this video onto what I've said in the past video, and I think that'll give you a holistic view of all the different facets of the cognitive functions, at least to my understanding. So whenever I'm talking about the cognitive functions, whenever I'm profiling people and stuff like that, this is the school of thought that I'm coming from. I'm not saying that it's 100% right, but I will say that according to my experience, this is what's worked. This is what I've asked people. I'll literally read stuff, and then I'll ask people that I'm certain are FE users, that I'm certain are SI users, that I'm certain are TE users. Hey, how do you relate to this? What is true about this? What is not true about this? And I will see, what the common consensus of all of that is. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you found it informational, and done.